Yes, it is 100 hours non-stop. The biggest names, the biggest faces, the best analysis, the CNN edge, all of that playing out here on CNN News 18. This is your one-stop destination for the U.S. elections. Who will America choose between Donald Trump and Joe Biden? And I tell you what, as of this morning, as of this 9 a.m. hour, Trump is doing as well as expected, if not better than expected. So if you're a Trump supporter, you are in a good place this morning, my friend. Let's give you the big picture. This is what the big picture is looking like right now in the race for the White House. Trump is retaining all of the states that he won in 2016. He's also making a gain in Virginia. Interesting. Trump had an early scare in Texas and in Florida, but he's now well ahead in both of those states. The race could hinge on Ohio and North Carolina. Both of those states he was trailing for a very long time. Right now, he is leading in both of those states. It will boil down to 7 states, as I said, ladies and gentlemen. He's got to win the 4 Rust Belt states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio. Guess what? He's leading in all 4 right now. Very, very early days in at least 3 out of those 4 Rust Belt states, but he's still leading in 4. He's also got to win the Sun Belt states. There, most of the votes are in. Certainly in Florida, more than 90% of the votes are in, and he is comfortably ahead. In Georgia, too, more than 50% of the votes are ahead, and he is comfortably ahead. And in North Carolina, he was trailing for a very long time, but now Trump is ahead in North Carolina. So he's got to win these 7 states, and it looks like he is on track to win those 7 important states. Let me just show this to you on the magic wall and give you a sense of why, if you're a Trump supporter, you should feel pretty good this morning. Trump, like we said, his path to 270 was a very narrow one, but a possible one. That's what he did in 2016, and that is what he's repeating in 2020. So what is that path to victory? He's got to hold on to Florida. He's right now well ahead in Florida. He's got to hold on to Georgia. He's right now well ahead in Georgia. He's got to hold on to Texas. There was a scare for him earlier in the morning. Texas was blue till about the 8 o'clock hour, but now Texas is back to being red, and he's holding on to Texas. He needed to hold on to North Carolina. He was again trailing Joe Biden there for a very long time, but now he's up ahead in North Carolina. So he's got the whole Sun Belt states, as it were. These were the sunshine states, which are of course much warmer than the northern part of the U.S. So he's winning at least 4 of those competitive states there in the Sun Belt. Then you got the big 4 up in the Rust Belt, the former industrial belt: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio. Ohio is the one that's reporting most of the votes. At least more than 75% of the votes are in Ohio. And Trump now leading in Ohio. Trump is also leading in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Joe Biden needs to breach that. Remember, Trump back in 2012 won all 4 of those states. He breached the famous blue wall, made it into a red wall of sorts. Unless Joe Biden makes at least 2 out of these 4 states, possibly Pennsylvania, possibly either one of Wisconsin, Michigan, unless he makes 2 out of these 4 competitive, he cannot win the White House. Right now, Trump leading in all 4. Watch out for those states. Arizona, again, an interesting state, about 10 or 11 electoral college votes. If Biden manages to flip that from red to blue, then that means Trump has to gain 1 state, and that 1 state seems to be Virginia. Remember, he had gone there on election day. He had gone to the RNC office in Virginia. Trump is leading there in Virginia by a substantial measure. But so far, it's been very, very peaceful. At least one can say that much about the U.S. election. There were fears of violence. There was fears of civil unrest and so on. But so far, we're well into election night. There seems to be a lot of, millions of Americans came out and voted very peacefully. Yes, there were Trump supporters, and yes, there were Biden supporters, but so far we haven't heard any instance of any major violence happening.
The race for the White House is at the finish line.
I think we're going to have a great night. We're going to have a great night, and we're going to have, much more importantly, we're going to have a great 4 years.
What I know is it hadn't changed is my absolute belief in the American people. You give them an even shot, they can do anything.
270 electoral votes are needed to win the presidency, as a record number of Americans went to the polls.
This is easy. They made it really simple.
A lot is going in the mail this year, rather than seeing a lot of folks here at the polls in this area, but I truly believe a lot of people are still voting.
President Trump is watching returns from the East Wing of the White House, with his senior staffers and family members by his side. Earlier saying he's not thinking about concession or acceptance speeches yet.
Hopefully, we'll be only doing one of those two. And winning is easy. Losing is never easy. Not for me, it's not.
Joe Biden is in Wilmington, Delaware, surrounded by family.
Voters determine who's president. This isn't gonna, no matter what he does, no matter what he says, the votes are gonna be counted.
In Wilmington, Delaware, I'm Camila Bernal reporting.
Let's bring in our battery of reporters. Let me go first across to Stacey Cohen. She's joining us from Wilmington, Delaware, which is Biden headquarters. She's joining us from there. We'll also be going across to Pavni Mittal, joining us from Times Square in New York, Reena Bharadwaj from D.C., and also Manisha Gandhi from Houston. But Stacey, let me start with you. Where is the former vice president? Who's there with him? What's the mood in Biden headquarters right now?
Well, the former vice president is at home at the moment with his family, and I'm assuming perhaps some close advisors watching the election returns come in. So what you see behind me is a stage that has been set. There are some supporters that have been permitted to come in. They're driving in and staying in their cars. Of course, we are still in the middle of the pandemic, so it's quite a different scene than what we traditionally are accustomed to here in the United States for election night events. So I am outside. Most of us are outside. And we don't know when we will see Mr. Biden, but we are expecting that he would make an appearance here at some point during the evening.
Are these early trends in keeping with what they were expecting? I mean, I look at the map, I look at the Sun Belt. The president seems to be doing, or at least certainly holding on to all the states that he won back in 2016. Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, even Texas. For a long time this night, Texas was blue, but now it's back in red. Is it in line with what Biden camp was expecting, or do they reckon that Trump is putting up a stronger fight than expected?
It's in line with what we've been hearing today. You know, Texas was always going to be a very big reach for a Democrat. It is not somewhere that has voted for Democrat for president in a very long time. So it was always going to be a big reach. I think what they're going to be looking for in Texas are trends. If the state, instead of being solid red, may be trending at least toward purple, and trying to move that in a different direction, which the Democrats would like to do in the future. Biden's camp had said earlier today that they did not think that the Sun Belt was holding good prospects for them, particularly Florida. So they're going to really sort of set their hopes on a Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota sort of area, even Arizona. And I guess we'll see what happens. Many of these races still too close to call.
Oh, absolutely. In the very early days in many of these states, certainly in Wisconsin, Michigan, and even in Pennsylvania. Ohio, there's a lot more of the vote that's in and counted. But Trump is leading in all four. I know it's very, very early days, but do they expect the results to come in at least some point tonight, or are they expecting it to go on perhaps for days and weeks?
You know, that's really it depends who you talk to question. And we are in kind of uncharted territory at this point. Due to the pandemic, there was an incredible amount of early voting and mail-in voting, and some of these states are still going to be counting ballots for up to a week after Election Day. It depends on the state and the state law. And so there are some states where we really may not have an answer for several days, and those answers could change. There was always anticipated to be what was known as a red wave on Election Day, where they expected more Republicans to vote in person and that more Democrats were likely to be the people mailing in ballots. So we don't know, and we're going to continue to watch the vote counts. I think it's fair to say if there's a landslide in one direction or another, then folks will feel safer calling it tonight.
Yeah, so far we're not seeing a landslide, at least. I mean, what we're seeing is two things. One, that Trump is holding on to the big states that he held. Almost the entire Southern Belt has gone to Trump. He's holding on to, places like Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. He's also ahead. Last time I checked, he was ahead in Virginia, so that'll be interesting if he manages to flip that. He's keeping Texas as well. The four states are up in the north, the Rust Belt as it's called, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio. Very, very early days yet, but Trump is leading in all four. So that's his path to the White House. If he has to get to 270 plus, he has to retain all of these states that he won back in 2016. And right now, he seems to be doing okay. Watch out for Arizona and Minnesota. Very competitive races both there. And if Joe Biden managed to flip both of those states, certainly Arizona, he could be competitive yet again. What are his plans, though, for later this night? Does he have a victory speech or a concession speech written down? Is he going to plan to address his supporters? Is there a cutoff time? Is they going to say, okay, by midnight or by 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., if the picture is clear, I'm going to come out and call it one way or the other?
We haven't been given a cutoff time, but it would be difficult to believe that any candidate would ignore supporters that have gathered out here for him. We were expecting him, or are expecting him, to come out at some point. He was saying earlier today that he is a superstitious man and really didn't want to comment on what he was expecting tonight. We heard much the same from President Trump as well. You know, politicians, much like many of us, have our superstitions, and making predictions on the day itself was going to be tough for both of them. So I guess we're just in a wait and see, but we are expecting something. Certainly they have a stage set up and supporters gathered out here, hopeful of seeing their candidate, even if we don't have an answer tonight.
All right, Stacey, we'll leave it at that. We'll be in touch with you through the course of what's likely to be a very long night for Stacey and all other CNN reporters, both outside Biden headquarters and Trump headquarters, and possibly also in all of these battleground states. Let me go across to a state which is not a battleground. New York has always been a solid blue state, and this time too it's gone to Joe Biden. Papni Mittal is joining us live from one of the most iconic spots there, Times Square, New York. New Yorkers watching this, what's going on right now there? I mean, have they started the party yet, or they're still all holding their horses, not knowing which way this one's going?
Well, good evening, and it's a young evening, and I'm not really seeing too many New Yorkers. You know, I remember in 2016, this place was packed, and to be very honest, you know, as someone who lives in New York, people tend to avoid Times Square because it's so touristy. What I'm seeing a lot is a lot of international press, so this really tells you about how much interest there is internationally. There's also strong, production set up by ABC News and CBS that are sort of, you have the ABC studio here, you have the CBS studio here. So that's actually what people are watching. And we're not really seeing a broadcast. So you can see people just, I can turn around and you can see the eyes are just fixated on that sort of ticker. And it's like, it's a blue state, as you said. So people are, sort of gunning for Biden's victory. So you can practically hear hearts stop every time you see something that, could be up and down. So that's really the scene from New York. But I think what's really underlying here beyond all of that is, and that's really standing out to me, is all the shops that are boarded up. Times Square has seen such, a drop in footfalls and celebration, and you still have these billboards beaming and gleaming, but below that you can see the preparation for, a sort of unrest. Stores taking no chances at all and boarding up, till the time they know that, the danger sort of has passed.
Pavi, I'm going to come to you in 1 second. Let me go across to CNN because they're calling a few states right now.
Michigan, 37% of the vote is in. Trump still maintains a 235,000 vote lead in Michigan, 54.8% to 43.4%. 37% of the vote is in. 33% of the vote is in Pennsylvania. Trump has a 236,000 vote lead in Pennsylvania, 54.3% to 44.3%. 37% of the vote is in Wisconsin. It's close. 25,000 vote lead for Trump over Biden, 50.1% to 48.2%. In Georgia, 58% of the vote is in. Trump has looks like a pretty comfortable lead of 387,000 votes, 55.7% to 43.1% in those states. Let's take a look at some more states right now. In Arizona, right now, 75% of the vote is in. Biden looks like he has a relatively comfortable 208,000 vote lead over Trump, 53.7% to 45%. In Minnesota, 37% of the vote is in. Biden there looks like a pretty comfortable nearly 300,000 vote lead over Trump, 60.7% to 37.2%. In Iowa right now, a quarter of the vote is in. Biden has a 76,000 vote lead over Trump, 57.4% to 41%. Let's go back to John King at the Magic Wall. So let's take a look at the Electoral College map right now. No surprises at all so far. 98 for Biden, 95 for Trump.
And so now you're getting into the battleground states as we flip it out. But again, you need the building blocks to get to 270 first.
All right, so 98 to 92. That's where we are right now for the Electoral College. Biden ahead by just 6. But don't pay much attention to that. We haven't started filling that up yet. I mean, when California reports, that'll be 55 Electoral College votes. What's key is that Trump is holding on to all the states that he won in 2016. He's holding on to Florida, he's holding on to Texas, he's holding on to Georgia, he's certainly ahead in North Carolina, and those 4 states up north in the Rust Belt, he is ahead in all 4 of them. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, he is ahead in all 4 of those states. In at least 3 of those 4 states, it's still early days. Anywhere between a quarter to a third of the votes have only been counted, so we're still a long ways off from calling any of those 4 states. But it's going to boil down to these 4 or 5 states, really, if Trump were to win, because he has to recreate the same path to victory that he had in 2016. I'm going to go back to Pavni as well as to Manisha Gandhi in Houston, Texas. Pavni, just in terms of, if Trump were to get another 4 more years, all this thing about civil unrest and people boarding up and so on, are we likely to see these racial tensions we've seen over the last 4 years get further exacerbated, the tensions between the haves and the have-nots and so on, because he's on track to repeat 2016. I'm saying this very carefully. We know it's still very, very early days in the Rust Belt, but he is very much on track to repeat 2016. So if it's going to be 4 more years of Trump, how may that affect places like New York?
I really cannot predict whether there will be tensions over the next few days. Hopefully, I hope not, simply because, we've had so many tensions. This has been a really tough year. But I think, New Yorkers, for them, there's a lot of hope in this, because New York is really borne the brunt of COVID-19 in terms of death, in terms of, economic, the impact of that, and of course of racial tension. I also think that, it's also important to see what's going on in the House and the Senate, because those are places where laws are made will really affect people. And, I think there is a lot that could happen tonight that could really determine the future. I think what we're really looking at is,
all right, Pavni, we'll try and fix your audio. I think there is a bit of a problem getting through to what you're saying. But let me go across to Manisha Gandhi in Houston, Texas. For a long period of time this morning and late night for you, Texas seemed to be going blue, but suddenly it's gone back again to red. It is the biggest state as far as the Republicans are concerned, second biggest in the country, 38 electoral college votes. Trump leading there now quite handsomely. But are the Democrats hopeful that at some point, maybe 4 years from now, maybe 8 years from now, they can actually make Texas purple in a way, making it competitive?
Absolutely. Democrats have worked so hard, and I'm pretty sure they're disappointed that Biden is not leading the state. But the senators and rural counties, Fort Bend County, one of the biggest county, most of the seats have actually gone to Democrats. So they have flipped the county to a blue county. Harris County, third largest county in the country, has also gone blue. So I do see the next election, big election, turning blue in Texas. A lot of the issues like immigration, health care, and they're very passionate to Democrats, and racial inequality and injustice. So I do see that happening actually in the next election.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Manisha Gandhi, Pavni Mittal, thanks for joining us right now. The popular vote, also, Trump seems to be ahead. This is not something that anybody expected. He's 51 to 48 in terms of the popular vote. In terms of the Electoral College, like I said, he's holding on to all the states that he won in 2016. He is doing as well as his people expected him to do, if not better. The one state he's managed to flip around, it hasn't been called yet, but certainly flipped around so far in as much as he's leading there, is Virginia. So let me welcome Ambassador Neelam Deo, Director Gateway House, former diplomat. Dhruv Jaishankar is Director of the U.S. Initiative at ORF. Kiran Majumdar-Shaw, entrepreneur and also Chairman of Biocon. Harinder Sekhan, Strategic and Foreign Policy Analyst. And Sadanand Dume is still with us, political commentator, joining us from the U.S. Dhruv, I'll start with you. Big picture so far, it seems to be both in the Sun Belt and in the Rust Belt, although early days in the Rust Belt. Trump seems to be holding on to all the states that he won in 2016.
Yes, so far. In fact, no big surprises amongst the states that have been called so far. The big surprises, if any, have been primarily in Florida, which has gone much more in Trump's favor than the polls anticipated. And the only silver lining so far for Joe Biden's camp really relates to Arizona, where he's looking like he has a comfortable lead and with a sizable number of the votes already declared. This looks like it may not be settled as of now. It looks like it may not be settled tonight. It'll come down to some of the key states in the Midwest, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And certainly Pennsylvania at the very least, and perhaps some of the others will not have a clear result tonight itself.
And at least 3 of those 4 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, there's only about 30% of the vote that's been counted. So a long, long ways to go before we can call any of those 4 or 3 states. Let me go back to Dr. Sakam. Just in terms of, you look at the polls in the run-up to election day, and every one of those polls, nationally and in these battleground states, were putting Joe Biden ahead. Fact is, on election night, Trump is doing better than expected. Does that say something to you about the direction in which America has moved? And also, certainly does say a thing or two about the whole business of pollsters and punditry.
I'm not surprised because as per expectation, I think the voting is going as per the polls which had taken place. And the early voting, the postal ballots and the early voting that took place was majorly in favor of the Democrats. But it was expected that the voters who will turn up on voting night are going to vote for Trump exceedingly. So I think this is where Trump is catching up. If we saw that initially, like say the case of Pennsylvania, Biden was leading and now Trump has assumed a lead over there. Similarly, in Texas, it's been a bit of a seesaw and Trump is rallying from behind. So I think the projections were quite correct that the voter which will come on election day is going to be overwhelmingly Republican, and that vote would favor Trump.
All right.
But it's going to be a close race, and I think the numbers, because in the morning Biden had a slightly comfortable lead. He had 94 to Trump's 72 electoral college votes. Mm-hmm. But now if you see that Trump has caught up, and the key states, swing states are going to be very key, the Midwest states, as in the 2016 election.
All right, it's 118 to 102 right now, but we still have a long way to go before this election. Either of them get up to 270. I'm going to take a break on that note, request both our guests to stay on. But like I said, it's going to boil down to these 4 or 5 states, and Trump needs to win a majority of them to keep the White House, because his path to victory, as it were in 2016, is a narrow one, but an important one. Quick break. We'll see you on the other side. Welcome back. It is the race for the White House, and I tell you what, it's 9:30 here in New Delhi. It is close to 11 o'clock in New York and Washington, and Donald Trump seems to be doing as well, if not better than expected as of right now. But who of the two, Biden or Trump, may be better for India? That's what we're going to look at in this segment. When it comes to checkmating China, Biden might slow down on the rhetoric if he were to become president. Trump is expected to further the rhetoric with China. When it comes to heat on Pakistan, both of them more or less similar, but Joe Biden unlikely to be as harsh with words, certainly, to Pakistan when it comes to the question of terrorism, as you had seen Trump over the last 4 years. When it comes to trade ties, and this has been an area, a bit of a sore thumb for India as well, Trump has been very tough on trade, both with China and with India. Biden might relax a bit and try to cut a deal, both with Beijing and Delhi. And finally, when it comes to the immigration question, and this is a real no-brainer, because both Biden and Harris would be much more friendly, much more accommodative when it comes to H-1B, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the Indian IT companies, than Trump has been. He has suspended, of course, the H-1B right now through the pandemic. Let me go across to our guests and also to our reporters. I'm going to first go across to Reena Bharadwaj, joining us from DC. We're fast approaching the 11 o'clock hour. So far, big picture, like I said, Trump is doing as well, if not better than expected. And two, and I think this is the good thing that I take away, millions of ballots have been cast. It's been by and large peaceful. There were worries of, civil unrest and clashes between police and protesters. But it seems so far things are going okay. Reena.
Absolutely, Zaka. Things look okay at this point, but there are reports of a few arrests here and there. Now, as election day winds down, hundreds of demonstrators and supporters of both President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden have gathered at this Black Lives Matter Plaza. Now, this is the same plaza where, George Floyd, the protest had started back in the month of June. Now, this is the spot where lots of people have gathered here, and some of the protests have even turned not violent, if I may say, but there have been scuffles here and there. I have witnessed just a few minutes ago when there was a protester who failed to comply with official orders. Also, there was a use of tear gas. I did speak to a few supporters and asked them that why they were here. They said they were very anxious to know about the results. So with me is Meena, who has just moved from Florida. Meena, what brings you here at this plaza all by yourself?
Well, the election is really important to me, and so are politics. I wouldn't be in America today if it wasn't for my parents being in asylum here. And they came from a war-torn country. And
Reena, just give me 1 second. We're going to CNN. They're projecting a few states now.
Projects Biden will win in the state of Oregon, 7 electoral votes there. Biden wins in Oregon right now. One projection for Donald Trump right now, CNN projects that Donald Trump will win the state of Wyoming. That's 3 electoral votes. In Idaho, too early to call, 4 electoral votes in Idaho. We cannot make a projection there. Let's take a look at the Electoral College map, see where it stands right now. Right now, Biden has a wide lead. He has 192 Electoral College votes. Trump has 108. 192 to 108. Let's get a key race alert in some of the battleground states where things stand. Let's start in Pennsylvania. 41% of the estimated vote is now in. Trump has seemingly a pretty comfortable 444,000 vote lead over Biden, 56.8% to 41.5%. In Michigan right now, 39% of the estimated vote is in. Trump has a significant lead there right now as well, 239,000 vote, but it's relatively early. 39% of the estimated vote is in, and the early vote, which skews Democratic, is not yet in. In Wisconsin, 42% of the vote is in. Look at how close it is. Trump has a 24,000, 25,000 vote lead over Biden, 50% to 48.3%, 10 electoral votes in Wisconsin. In Arizona, 75% of the vote is in, and Biden has a significant lead in Arizona, 208,000 vote lead over Trump, 53.7% to 45%, 11 electoral votes at stake over there. Let's go back to John King. All right, so right now, Biden has a significant 192.
The way this has been going, Trump is leading in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. 3 of those states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, the votes are still too early. Less than 40% of the votes counted in those 3 states. Ohio, much more. But Trump is leading in all 4, and it will boil down to those states. The Electoral College right now, 192 Biden, 105 to Donald Trump. Don't go by that too much, because CNN has just called California 55 Electoral College votes to Joe Biden. That's the biggest state in the United States. It's Kamala Harris's home state. So no surprises there. But really, it will boil down to these 3 or 4 states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and then, of course, if Trump can hold on to Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia that he won back in 2016. Neelam Deo is joining us, and Harinder Sekhon is also with us on the broadcast. I think the big picture is 2 things. One, Trump is holding on to all the big states that he won. He's fairly competitive in all the Sun Belt states. He will take Florida. He will take Texas. He will likely take Georgia and North Carolina. And even in the Rust Belt states, where he won very, very narrowly in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, he is leading in all 4 of those Rust Belt states. So if this were to hold through the night, then Donald Trump is going to be president for a second term. Neelam Deo.
Yeah, that's how it's looking at the moment. But I think you need to remember that a lot of Democrats cast their votes early, and the early votes are being counted after the votes of those people who came in today to cast their votes. So it could change, but it doesn't have to. And what is clear is that it's a really close race, and that in many states it's down to 1 or 2% leads one way or the other. So it shows how polarized America is again and again in terms of political affiliation. And I think that that has a message for everybody to understand that even after the election, whoever wins, this polarization is not going to go away. So the divisions, the cleavages in American society will remain and will remain sharp.
Yeah, one of the things that's really surprised me, you know, when you go back to the polls leading up to Election Day, and they were all saying that Trump is trailing in all of these battleground states. In any case, nationally, he was trailing by about 8 or 9 points. But certainly in the battleground states, he was trailing in every one of them. And yet, he seems to be ahead now. I know it's still early days, certainly in the Rust Belt states with less than 40% of the votes counted. It is still very, very early days. But what explains why he's doing as well, if not better, than people expected him?
Well, you know, everybody knew, and he spoke about a red wave in the early part of the counting. And the Democrats obviously hoping that the blue wave, which will come a bit later, will overtake this red wave. That has to do with the fact that different states have different regulations. Some states began the counting of early votes the same morning. Other states are going to have to wait till all the voting in person are counted and then begin to count the votes that came by mail. Then there are states like Pennsylvania which are going to accept votes that come in even 3 days later and sometimes even longer. So it's because of the peculiar election system of the United States, where there is no unified commission. Each state runs its own elections, and you know, the election officials sometimes even have different rules for counties within a state. So I think that can blur the picture when you're looking at early counting.
All right, I'll get a quick word from Harinder Sakau, and I'll thank both our guests. What are you looking out for? I mean, if it's going to be 4 more years of Trump, and right now, like I said, it's early days. It's a little past 9:30 here in Delhi. It's a little past 11 o'clock in Washington. Still very early days. But do you see this sort of going contested, going all the way to the Supreme Court, or do you think by the end of the night tonight, possibly early afternoon here in India, we might actually get a definitive answer as to who the next U.S. president is?
It all depends on the outcome of the swing states. And if Trump is leading by a sizable margin, then I think we are saved from a contest in the Supreme Court. But if it is a close fight, as it happened in 2000 when George Bush won by a very slender margin of 1 electoral college vote, and Florida held the key to that. So if something like that happens, if it's a very close contest, then I think the Supreme Court is going to see a lot of litigation, Trump and Biden trading charges, and that is likely to go in favor of Trump, as the feeling is that he has filled up the Supreme Court by conservative judges. So I think the picture is going to be clear only when a few more votes come in.
Okay.
But on the whole, for India, I think we are comfortable with either, and we can take that up later.
All right. All right. Well, let's take a break right now. As I said, the big picture right now, 192 Joe Biden, 108 Donald Trump, but that could be a little misleading because California has been added. It's been called by CNN. They haven't added Texas and Florida yet. So once those go into the Republican sort of box, you will see Trump's numbers going up. But it boils down to, like we've been saying for days now, it boils down to Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, possibly Ohio. We'll see how those 4 states play out. Quick break. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back. It is the race for the White House. It's 9:45 here in Delhi. It is 11:15 in New York and Washington. Big picture. 192 to Joe Biden, 108 to Donald Trump. But don't get carried away by that figure because we haven't added the big Republican states, Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. Trump is doing as well, if not better than expected in both the Sun Belt states as well as in the Rust Belt states. He's leading in all of these states, although in the Rust Belt states, and at least 3 of them, much of the vote is yet to be counted, and particularly the early vote is yet to be counted, and the early vote is expected to be overwhelmingly Democrat. Nonetheless, Trump is leading in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, the 4 Rust Belt states. He's also leading in the Sun Belt states. He's handsomely going to take Florida. Remember, more than 95% of the vote is counted there, and he has a healthy lead in Florida. He seems to be leading very well in Georgia. North Carolina, he's pulled it back now. For the longest time of this morning, it was Biden who was leading North Carolina, but now Trump is leading, and quite handsomely there. There could be some interesting scenarios playing up both in Arizona as well as in Minnesota, but we don't know that yet. Right now, Biden is leading in both of those states, but it could well go back into being red territory. So big picture, yes, Trump is holding on to all of the states that he won in 2016 and then some. And if this were to continue, if this trend were to stay for at least another 3 or 4 hours, then it looks like it's going to be a good night in Trump HQ. Remember, just as the polling closed, he sounded extremely optimistic. He said it's going to be a good night for him and his campaign. He's hoping to pull off yet another upset win, much like he did in 2016. Let's listen in to what Trump had to say as the polls closed nationwide.
In an election year unlike any other, the historic 2020 presidential campaign is coming to a close. After barnstorming through 4 states on Monday, the president is spending Election Day close to the White House, paying a visit to campaign headquarters in Virginia.
I'm hearing we're doing well all over. I hear the lines are amazing.
As his challenger, former Vice President Joe Biden, remained on the trail in Pennsylvania, working to get out the vote in his hometown.
My name is Joe Biden. I was born in Mercy Hospital in Scranton.
According to a survey of election officials by CNN, Edison Research, and Catalyst, more than 100 million ballots were cast early across the country. In Pennsylvania, many voters waited to turn out until Election Day.
From my reports this morning, we've got long lines and people ready to vote at the polls.
Both candidates hoping a win in the Keystone State will help unlock a victory.
Power to change this country is in your hands.
We win Pennsylvania, we win the whole deal. You know that, right?
Pennsylvania, along with other battleground states like Michigan, Florida, and Wisconsin, will make all the difference, and voters there know it.
I know that, especially, this township specifically, I know it can usually swing. So I just wanted to make sure that I was in. I put in my vote and made it count.
The president hoping another surprise upset in those critical states will deliver him the White House once again.
I think we're going to have a great night. We're going to have a great night, and we're going to have, much more importantly, we're going to have a great 4 years.
In Washington, I'm Nadia Romero.
Trump there saying we're going to have a good night and we're going to have a good 4 years. Neelam Deo is still with us. Ambassador Deo, again, it comes back down to, like I said, the fact that most of the, Beltway media, most of the pollsters did not expect Donald Trump to do this well. He seems to be on course. If he were to hold this, and I know it's early days, but if he were to hold these leads in all of these 6 or 7 states, he will win a second term.
Yeah, that's correct. The only thing we need to keep in mind is that the numbers who voted early, almost 100 million people, that's a significant factor. That doesn't mean that they were all Democrats. Many of them would have been Republicans. Many of them would have been seniors, suburban voters. The expectation from pollsters was that all of these 3 categories were going for Biden. But it doesn't work that way. And I think previous polls, especially the last election, should have taught us all that, an election is an election and anything can happen. So I do think that the lead that Trump enjoys in many of these states will narrow as more and more of the mail-in ballots are counted. But he may still win because of the number of big Republican, normally red states like Texas, like Florida, he has comfortable leads, and those results have still to come in fully.
Okay. All right. Let's go across to CNN. They're making a key race alert. Let's see what the call is.
Take a look at it here. 59%. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. That would be interesting if that one switched. But at the moment, we'll just leave it here until we know otherwise. We'll leave it here. So here's where you get. Again, we have the congressional district here and the congressional district here that could change the math a little bit. But if you take these off the board, and if Joe Biden can't win Ohio, we haven't called it yet. We have to wait. We're waiting on votes and everything like. You're just looking for flips. So what happens if we're waiting on these states because they're having normal delays plus additional delays counting their votes? We could get to a point in a few hours when we start to fill in some of the ones that are left. We're somewhere in this ballpark, and we're fighting it out. over these states.
Yeah, it's it's going to be amazing to watch. Everybody's got to be patient, though, and let everyone count the votes as they should. That's what's critically important.
It is critical, and so we're going to get to a point. I'm going to shift maps again. We're going to get to a point again.
So that's where things are right now. Joe Biden, 192 Electoral College votes, and Donald Trump, 114. Don't get carried away by that, though, because California, the biggest, has already been called. So are the other West Coast states of Oregon and Washington State. Still to call, Texas, Florida, where both of those states, that's 38 in Texas and 29 in Florida, Trump looks like he's leading by substantial margins there. So once those two get added, Trump's figure will go up quite substantially. But like we've been saying all through the morning, it's going to boil down to those 4 states up north around the Great Lakes: Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Ohio, we've got about 80% of the vote in, but the other 3, we're still waiting. Less than 30% of the vote in most of those states. So we're going to watch those states very closely. We'll take a break on this note. This is the place to be. CNN News 18 is the place to be for election morning in America. Good morning. It is 10 a.m. here in New Delhi. It is 11:30 p.m. in the East Coast of the United States. And what a race it is turning out to be between Donald J. Trump and Joseph R. Biden. Right now, if you're a president supporter, if you're a Trump supporter, he is doing as well, if not better, than expected, certainly compared to 2016. Here's the big picture as far as Donald Trump and Joe Biden are concerned. Donald Trump is holding on to all of the states that he won in 2016, both the Sun Belt and in the Rust Belt, in the South as well as in the North. In the South, he's leading in Florida, he's leading in Georgia, he's leading in North Carolina, and he will handsomely take home Texas. So if you add Texas and Florida to that list right now, it's 192 Biden, 114 Donald Trump. Trump will come up to the 180, 190 figure. Then, and we've been saying this for a very long time, it is going to boil down to the 4 Rust Belt states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio. And guess what? Trump is leading in all 4 of those states. That's all he needed to do, and that's exactly what he's doing. So if you're in the Trump HQ right now, and he has a small party organized for his friends, family, advisors in the White House, about 300-400 people, you are in a good position. You're in a happy frame of mind right now because it's gone exactly according to your plan. He's breaching the blue wall once again in the North. He's holding to the Sun Belt states in the South. And that is exactly what the doctor ordered. That was the Trump playbook in 2016, and that seems to be the Trump playbook yet again in 2020. If you're Joe Biden, watch out for some of the flip states, possibly. Arizona, there he's leading by a healthy 200,000 plus votes. There is a tight fight going on in Minnesota, but Joe Biden needs to flip at least 2 of the 4 Rust Belt states, and there it's too early to tell, because in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, just about 30 to 40% of the votes have been counted so far. So we are ways off from being able to give a clear picture of those states, and all the more so it gets complicated because the early votes get counted last there, as opposed to some of the southern states where the early votes get counted first. or much earlier than the actual in-person voting on election day, whereas in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, the early votes have not been counted yet. A bulk of the early votes are still to be counted. So let's bring that up here on the magic wall. This is where the race stands as of right now. 192 Biden, 114 to Trump. Don't get carried away by that figure, because this figure 192 is primarily coming from these big states in the West Coast. He's got California, Oregon, Washington State all added, all called in favor of the Democrat, whereas for the Republican, this figure is still low because the two biggest Republican territories, as it were, Texas and Florida, 38 electoral college votes in Texas, 29 in Florida. Those two have not been called yet, but Trump is leading in Texas and in Florida. I'd be very surprised if it flips back to blue anytime soon. So those two will most likely go into the Trump column as well. You got Georgia, another 16 electoral college votes. You got North Carolina, another 15 electoral college votes. So 31 electoral college votes. Let me just add that up. You got 38 here. You got 29 here. You got 16 here. You got another 15 here. So you got 31. Then you got 60. So you're essentially looking at 98 electoral college votes to be added to Joe Biden. So 114, 98, that takes him to well past 200. That means he's overtaking Joe Biden. So if these states, the Sun Belt states, all go to Donald Trump, as is expected, he's leading handsomely in all of these states, then Donald Trump goes ahead of Joe Biden. He's 200 plus, Biden is 192. But like we've been saying all along, it boils down to these four: Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Wisconsin, his lead is very narrow, 25-30,000 votes. Ohio, it's quite substantial. He's leading by 300,000-400,000 votes there. Pennsylvania, Michigan, again, 200,000 vote lead so far. But like I said, both Pennsylvania, Michigan, and also to a great extent Wisconsin, the early votes have not been counted yet. That's going to be a long process. It's going to take a long time to count those votes, and that's where Joe Biden is hoping to catch up from behind. So that's really the state of the race so far. If you're a Trump fan, you're happy with the results so far. You're happy with the lead so far. It is as per plan. If you're Biden, you're hoping that they can get to those early vote counts as quickly as possible in some of these battleground states. One thing that stands out in this election has been the early votes, and like I said, the Biden camp is counting on those early votes. 100 million people voted early, even before the first vote was cast on election day, and all of it so far has been peaceful. So all of those worries about a civil unrest and people buying guns and applying for background check licenses and so on, all of those fears, at least up until this point, seem to have been premature, because so far it's been a peaceful democratic exercise with ordinary Americans coming out and casting their ballot. This is what the story of the American election has been so far.
The race for the White House is at the finish line.
I think we're going to have a great night. We're going to have a great night, and we're going to have, much more importantly, we're going to have a great 4 years.
What I know is, it hadn't changed, is my absolute belief in the American people. You give them an even shot, they can do anything.
270 electoral votes are needed to win the presidency, as a record number of Americans went to the polls.
This is easy. They made it really simple.
A lot is going in the mail this year, rather than seeing a lot of folks here at the polls in this area, but I truly believe a lot of people are still voting.
President Trump is watching returns from the East Wing of the White House, with his senior staffers and family members by his side, earlier saying he's not thinking about concession or acceptance speeches yet.
Hopefully we'll be only doing one of those two, and winning is easy. Losing is never easy. Not for me, it's not.
Joe Biden is in Wilmington, Delaware, surrounded by family.
Voters determine who's president. This isn't gonna, no matter what he does, no matter what he says, the votes are going to be counted.
In Wilmington, Delaware, I'm Camila Bernal reporting.
All right, so it is going to be a long night. Certainly, we're not going to call this anytime soon. It's going to boil down to what we've been saying all along: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio. But what's the mood like in the national capital in Washington, D.C.? Reena Bharadwaj joining us live from D.C. So far, it's a long night. It's close to midnight there. What's the big picture in terms of which way election 2020 has gone for both Donald Trump and for Joe Biden?
Well, let me just tell you, Zaka, the US election chaos is out on the streets in Washington, D.C. I'm just 2 blocks away from the White House, and let me tell you, the scenes here don't look very comforting as they should look just before an election night. I have witnessed a couple of police clashes with Black Lives Matter protests outside the White House. This is the Black Lives Matter Plaza, where activists have planned an 8-hour event. This is the same spot where George Floyd protests took place back in the month of June. This demonstration here is a 2-block long section on the 16th Street in downtown Washington, D.C. The plaza is 2 blocks away from the White House, and demonstrators have erected a giant screen showing the election results. Now, groups called Shut Down DC and Black Lives Matter are here to say that this could be the start of a next phase of an election cycle on the streets. Some supporters of President Trump are seen, but they're a handful, of course, and of course they're hugely outnumbered too.
Right, Reena, coming back to you in 1 second. The popular vote, for the first time, we're seeing Joe Biden ahead of Donald Trump. I suspect that's because some of the bigger states, Democrat states in the West, are now reporting. California, the most populous state, is reporting. It's been called in favor of the Democrats. So 50-49. But that is not the race that matters. The race that matters is the one to the Electoral College. And there right now, it seems like Trump has the advantage. Remember, he's leading substantially in all of the battleground states, whether it's in the Sun Belt, whether it's in the Rust Belt. He is leading in every single one of them, and I don't think that would be comforting, certainly for the Biden headquarters. Certainly, Biden will be hoping that the early votes in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania are all quickly counted, because that's where they're hoping their supporters would have cast en masse. The Democrats would have cast en masse early votes. So they're hoping that some of those numbers run up for them. But right now, it is looking good for Donald Trump. It is looking like what he did in 2016, that unlikely, improbable path to victory. He's managed to carve that out once again. Let me go across to former Foreign Secretary Nirupama Rao, who's joining us with her perspective on what's going on. Right now, it's still very early days, ma'am. We probably, maybe past noon, maybe closer to 1 o'clock, we might get a better sense of who is leading. But the big picture seems to be that Donald Trump is holding on to all the states that he won in 2016 and then some. And if this trend holds, he will come back to the White House for a second term.
Yes, I would entirely endorse your assessment, Zaka. And I think what the pollsters in the last few days were saying doesn't seem to really conform to the ground situation, as I've all along said. And I believe that President Trump is defying all predictions. And although we don't know what the outcome is going to be finally, it's going to be a very close call, and things are looking good for Mr. Trump.
All right, ma'am, just give me 1 second. Let me go across to CNN. They're making some projections now. I'm going to come back to her in 1 second.
Carolina, right now 95% of the vote is in, relatively close, only a 75,000 vote Trump lead over Biden, 50% for Trump to 48.7% for Biden. In Iowa right now, 70% of the vote is in, very close, only a 31,000 vote lead for Trump over Biden, 50.3% to 47.8%. Let's go back to John King at the Magic Wall. So close in some of these states, there's still a lot of outstanding votes to be counted.
Yeah, and we're going to wait late into the night for some of them
to be counted in some of those states. But from Biden's perspective, only Arizona seems to be the toss-up state where he's leading. All the other states, it is Trump who's leading. But ma'am, the point that you made, and I think it's a very important one, a very something that everybody in the states, everybody who's involved in the business of either polling or punditry, needs to sit up